What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Today we're talking about why so many of us hesitate to step up and lead, and it often comes down to two things: a lack of vulnerability and the distractions that we use to avoid it. How often do we ask God, what's stopping your purpose from being fulfilled in my life? Many of us never do, and we get comfortable in our disobedience. We ignore his nudges, and soon we're spiritually asleep. And our disobedience doesn't just affect us, it ripples out. Jonah's refusal to obey brought a storm that nearly sank others, and the same is true about us. We fill our lives with noise to avoid facing the areas where God is calling us to change. But leadership doesn't start with pretending that we have it all together. It begins by admitting our weakness and letting God work through it. So stop hiding. Ask God that critical question. Confront your resistance. Embrace vulnerability. Step into obedience for your sake and for those that God has placed in your life.
What, in your experience, is the number one thing holding men back? As we think about this series, Jonah, the reluctant leader, holding men back from being that leader that God has called them to be.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my answer, and I do want to share my wife's answer as well, because I was talking about this with my wife, and I immediately told her one thing, and she goes, well, I think it's this as well. And when she said it, I was like, yep, 100%.
Yeah.
My immediate response was vulnerability.
Okay.
I look at all of the guys, even at the church that I pastor, and just looking at their stories, and I'm like, dude, I think that the culture has made men feel like they're not masculine if we're vulnerable. It's the same. Like, I'm not gonna look at the instruction book. I'm not gonna ask for directions. I got this. I can figure it out. I don't need anyone else's help. But that translates into the spiritual side of, I'm not going to be vulnerable before the Lord and be broken. You know, it's like, in the Beatitudes, the first thing that Jesus says in the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And as you study that, you go, he's not saying be sad, be poor in spirit in the way that maybe we would translate that, but he's going, you won't inherit the kingdom of God if you can't be broken before the Lord until you realize I'm bankrupt spiritually.
Yeah.
And that requires vulnerability.
Yeah.
If we can't be vulnerable to recognize our sin, if we can't be vulnerable to invite another man in to hear and see my brokenness and invite him to strengthen me, to as iron sharpens iron, so when one man sharpens another. You don't get that without vulnerability. You do not get accountability without vulnerability. You're never going to step into your calling as a man. You're never going to step into the fullness of submission to Christ without vulnerability. And I see too many men love the idea of God, love the idea of leading their wives and their families, but will not step into vulnerability. And so they remain just stuck. Why do I continue to fall for the same sin over and over and over and over again? Why can't I stop being angry? Why can't I stop looking at porn? Why can't I give? It's because you won't be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think that's the first major hurdle to jump over as a man in order to step into that calling. I think it's vulnerability. And then my wife, my unbelievably wise wife, she immediately goes, Josh, we're too distracted. Men are too distracted. You can't go sit on the toilet. And she's talking to me. And I'm
That's
like,
a man
dang.
thing. That toilet
Right.
with the
You
phone.
You can't. Why are you in there for 20 minutes? I'm like, well,
You kind of get carried away on the phone.
I was watching this golf video, and I'm
working on my swing, babe.
I'm learning, babe. And, I want to take my time. Also, I knew that you were having to feed the baby, and for whatever reason, we're just distracted. We're so distracted. You know how little, if you got an iPhone, that little reminder pops up every week, and it's like, hey, your average time on the phone this week was 5 hours.
Was too much.
What? I spent 5 hours
How
on
is that even
average
possible?
a
That's
day.
actually insane.
And I'm like, it's got to be me reading the Bible, right? And then you open up the Bible app and you're like, oh, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I doing?
Mm.
But we're just so distracted, and I think that distraction, prevents us from managing our time. And you go, oh well, how many guys in the church when I go, you reading your word? Nah.
Yeah.
Why?
So busy.
It's not because
I'm
you don't
busy.
think it's a priority.
Yeah.
It's not because you don't see the value of the written word of God. It's because you are distracted. You certainly have time. If you're 5 hours on your phone, you certainly have time, but you don't prioritize it because you're just distracted.
Yeah.
And distraction hinders our growth, and it hinders us stepping into the calling that God has for us. That's the two things that immediately, when my wife said distraction, and for me vulnerability, I
They almost
feel that-
partner though,
Yeah.
right? Like you distract because you don't want to be vulnerable as well.
Yeah,
A
they
lot of
could
times.
definitely.
The more busy I make my life, the less I have to deal with the things that I don't want to.
Because I'm dealing on the surface with everything, and I don't go deep with anything.
And then your excuse is I'm too busy.
Oh, I'm too busy. Yeah.
To engage that.
Got to get rid of the B word. Let's hop into the Jonah study then, and kind of how the format will be is you just we're looking at Jonah 1 verses 4 through 10. And you're just going to kind of dive into it and take us through it. Alan and I will ask questions and maybe make comments as the Lord brings them to mind. So
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have already gone through verses 1 through 3.
correct.
Okay, so verse 4. And I'm reading out of NLT.
Okay.
But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. But all this time, Jonah was sound asleep in the hold. So the captain went down after him. "How can you sleep at a time like this?" he shouted. "Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives." Then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. "Why has this awful storm come down on us?" they demanded. "Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality?" And Jonah answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them that he was running away from the Lord. "Oh, why did you do it?" they groaned. I go back to verse 4, but the Lord hurled a powerful wind. And what is Jonah doing? Jonah is sleeping soundly.
Yeah.
I read that and I just think, how is it that we can have peace in our disobedience?
That's good.
We're talking about men and talking about what's holding us back from. How many men are not even asking the question, what's stopping me from fulfilling God's purpose in my life? We grow so content in our disobedience, and I don't think it starts that way. I think that when we commit over time to just being casual Christians, when we essentially we quench the Spirit, because if you're following the Lord, the Spirit's speaking to you. And when you step outside of that into some type of sin, you feel that deep in your heart, like, oh God, I shouldn't do this, I know I'm wrong. But if you ignore that long enough, you could just be asleep in the midst of chaos, and this is where Jonah's at.
Yeah.
And when we become comfortable in our sin, this is when we see it start to affect not just us, but the people around us.
Yeah.
As a pastor, I have people come into my office on a regular basis. They're like, "Pastor, everything is falling apart. A violent storm. My marriage is on the brink. My kids won't talk to me. I lost my job. We're in financial ruin. I don't know what to do." I deal with people who are in a violent storm in their lives. And when you really get down to the nuts and bolts, because the lack of vulnerability, I'm not going to admit to you right off the rip that I have completely abandoned the Lord and ran from his calling on my life. I'm not going to admit to you right away that I am seriously addicted to pornography. I'm not going to admit to you right away I have not picked up my Bible in 6 months. You see me in church weekly, but I'm checking the box. They're not going to admit that right off the rip. But when you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's like, oh, you have completely stepped outside of the direction of the Lord for your life. And I mean, hello, go read the book of Judges. Every single chapter starts with, and the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And what happens? It's not that he no longer loves the Israelites. It's not that they're no longer the chosen nation. They still are. But when we remove ourselves from the direction and the commission and the grace and the mercy of God, what happens? In his great love and mercy for us, he removes the covering and the blessing.